Then the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat. The calf and the lion cub will graze together, and a little child will lead them. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and a little child will lead them. Now, back when I was a kid during this time of year, particularly when there was actually snow, I could hear the howl of wolves at night from my bedroom. And between those wolves and me, I could also hear the barking and scrambling of coyotes and feral dogs. In fact, once or twice, our dogs in the morning dragged the remains of the pack's fresh kill onto our lawn, which was grisly and memorable. No doubt many of you have had similar experiences. I mean, we didn't all live in the suburbs all the time, right? And even here in the suburbs, these things can happen. There was a recent coyote scare discussed extensively on the Natick Dads Facebook group, for example. But when I first read this passage and thought about it today, the wolves that sprang to mind weren't like the ones I remembered from those cold winter nights, or from camping, or from even the zoo. They weren't really even wolves at all, at least not in any biological sense. But instead, what I read was one of many metaphors in a list. I saw in our reading a list of predators and a list of prey, of victims. I thought of the wolves of Wall Street and people like them. Self-involved, frequently self-destructive, greedy, and in their greed, dragging everyone else down. And that was an easy leap to make. To go from nature's wolves to humanity's wolves. After all, we've seen a lot of people like that. All one has to do is keep on top of the news to see powerful people taking advantage of weak people, and to see those powerful people celebrated and given even more power. The idea that people like that, like those human wolves, would change their ways. Seems like a nice idea, an admirable goal and utopian vision, but it's also one that isn't terribly realistic at the practical, everyday level that we live in. These human wolves always need to be curtailed or limited in some way. And if they change their hearts, new wolves will arise. Now, the same image in Isaiah, the peaceable kingdom, is sometimes also viewed as a metaphor for peace. In those cases, often it will be combined with Isaiah's comments a few chapters earlier about beating swords into plowshares. And here again is that utopian vision, the goal to strive for. The aggressors, we are told, will stop being aggressive. And the defenders, the oppressed, will suddenly feel comfortable with that change. As if the human wolves woke up a few days ago, declared, "New year, new me," and the rest of us just accepted our good fortune. Now, the great thing about Holy Scriptures, though, in any tradition, is that they hold multiple meanings. So while we in this room have given a great deal of thought, and will in the future, to that very ideal of Isaiah, to a world of justice and peace, there is nothing wrong with changing our view a bit to make these wolves a little bit more personal, a little bit more accessible. Talitha Arnold, in her reading today, looks at these wolves as actual wolves, like the ones in our memories. And that is how those astrologers The heroes of the Epiphany story would have seen them as they journeyed through the wilderness, which is, after all, the predator's home. And those shepherds would have seen them that way too. Now, both the astrologers and the shepherds would have also gotten the metaphor, of course. The astrologers had met Herod and were choosing to strike a blow against him, while the shepherds were well aware, either choosing or being forced to spend their days on the edge of human civilization, they were well aware of the corrupting potential that civilization had upon human beings. So while wolves would have been a threat, actual wolves, to their sheep and their livestock, and maybe their lives, they were also part of the natural order, a fact of life in a world that was still not controlled by human beings, but was instead free and powerful and in control of itself. You know, I don't actually remember being afraid of the wolves by my window. I do remember being very respectful of their space. I had my place in the bedroom, which would be a very strange place for a wolf to be, and they had their place in the woods next to our house. And while neither of us probably ever really wanted to meet the other, that was the way it was, and probably the way it should be. Unlike the wolves of Wall Street, nature's predators have a place in a system. While individual prey has reason to fear, as a whole, they do not. The herd is kept healthy, and everyone who consumes that herd stays healthy too. So those shepherds, their job wasn't to eradicate wolves, a force of nature like the wind or the ocean to them, but to keep them in their place and away from their specific charges. To the original audience of Isaiah, the place of predators, actual predators, not metaphorical ones, was a sign of God's healthy creation. A sign of God's healthy creation. And some dream of a new relationship where everyone got along wouldn't have changed that. Which explains Arnold's lament today. Isaiah saw the possibility of all kinds of animals living together, she said. In our time, it's a challenge to see the possibility of those animals simply staying alive. Those human wolves, it turns out, don't have much need for or interest in actual wolves. Or, in fact, they don't have that much need for or interest in many actual humans. The surplus population of that famous metaphorical wolf, Ebenezer Scrooge. So in some sense, nature's predators and prey are already on the same side. Nature's predators and prey are already on the same side in the face of the larger predator of a 21st century human society which seems to have little or no concern for creation and humanity at all. Those words from Isaiah that we started with were already centuries old at the time of Jesus' birth. The shepherds and the astrologers would have known them. They would also have yearned for a time when the brutal order of things would change. However, they also understood that in the year ahead, the wolves would come. Sometimes actual wolves, or other risks from nature. Famine, disease, the long, rough passages on the journey. For the world was not built for them, as we humans were meant to be a much smaller part of the wonder of life. But sometimes, probably much more often, these wolves would be Herod and his successors, or just the echoes of sacrifices made to live in a new civilization separated from the divine. And that is where we find ourselves today, too. Maybe the message of this season, now almost past, is just this: that there will be wolves on our road this year. That some will be there to hurt us, to tempt us, to put us down, but that others, though they may be rough and in some ways threatening or scary, others may actually be allies and friends that we do not see or acknowledge yet. And maybe, perhaps those we see as friends or necessary evils in our lives aren't so friendly and aren't so necessary after all. Now, the purpose of prophets is to remind us that we do not have to settle for the world that we live in, and that the commonwealth of heaven is in fact moving among us. Our task is to search for it, to make room, to see through what we are told is true to what is actually true, to follow the stars and the angels even if they don't quite make sense, and accept that maybe, just maybe, we are closer to laying down with those wolves than we think. Now, Talitha Arnold closed our reading today with these words. When Isaiah promises that a little child will lead the wolves and lambs, the prophet reminds us it is also a plea for the renewal of all creation. So today, as we take communion for the first time this year, let us remember to take it in the spirit of solidarity and relationship with everything that must be renewed. May you have a moment of silent prayer in this house.